Welcome back to another episode of the KSL.com Rock and Royal Podcast, College Football Edition, Week 4, I guess technically Week 5, Week 4 for BYU, Game 4 in Week 5, that's what we're going with. Game 4 in Week 5 for BYU football. Number 25, I guess we should say, although we'll get into that a little bit later, as the Cougs open up Big 12 play on the road. Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado, against the University of Colorado. The Buffs 2-2 on the year, 0-1 in Big 12 play. And I'm going to bring in a couple of, we'll call them hashtag Buffs insiders. I don't know if they like that term at all. But I feel a certain type of way about that term when people refer to it to me. So I like making other people feel uncomfortable. First up on the line, a guy who's very used to talking into a microphone, way more used to talking into a microphone than me. So I'm just going to kind of get out of his way and let him go. Tyler Fransen from Team 1340 Radio out in Grand Junction. That's the CU Buffs affiliate out there on the western slope of Colorado. If you're traveling to the game, if you're headed up to Folsom Field, go tune them in for pregame, going back to your hotel, postgame, anything of the like. But Tyler, thanks so much for joining me to talk a little Buffs, talk a little Cougs, and maybe everything in between.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Tyler, let's dive right into it because let's kind of start historical, I guess. So we talked a little bit about this off air, and I prepped you some for it. But BYU Colorado, this is the 14th all-time meeting. Colorado leads that, by the way, 8-4-1 for those who want that historical footnote in there. And the second meeting in the last roughly calendar year, in the last 365 days.
Less than 10 months or so.
Yeah, about 9.5 months ago, I think we were playing this game down at the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. BYU fans remember that one well, 36-14 win over Coach Prime and the Buffs to cap that remarkable 11-2 season. Colorado fans probably want to forget that game a little bit more, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But that also came at the tail end of an incredible season for the Buffs as well, led by Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, obviously winning the Heisman Trophy, et cetera, et cetera. Before that, do you know, a little trivia time, Tyler? The last time BYU and Colorado met on the gridiron before last December's Alamo Bowl?
Before the Alamo Bowl. Oh my God. Okay. I would have to, I don't know the exact year. If I had to guess, I would say it's been at least 15 years.
Yeah, that would be correct. It was I think it was 1988. Wow, now I'm looking at or 89, 88 or 89, somewhere in there. It's the Freedom Bowl in Los Angeles.
That's insane.
The last time BYU visited Folsom Field, in fact, was 1981. So BYU won that game 41-20. So the Cougs have a chance to go on a road winning streak against Colorado, but I don't think anybody's going to count it because most of us weren't really doing much, if anything, to do with college football, I think, back in 1980.
So 1981, my mother would have been in high school at Boulder High School. And then like a year later, she went to CU. So I was not even a twinkle in my mother's eye in 1981.
I was going to say, okay, so I don't feel as bad saying neither one of us were born the last time these two teams met on the field in
Boulder,
Yeah, at Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado. Needless to say, it's been a while. For two teams that are only about 500 miles apart, it's really not that far of a drive between Provo and Boulder. It feels like these two squads don't get together nearly enough, certainly on the football field. And I, for one, am glad to see them now back in the same conference for the first time since the early 40s, since I think the days of the Mountain States Conference, it was called back then. And is there any feeling that way with CU fans as well, kind of like being back in the same like regionalization with BYU, with Utah, with kind of that group in there?
The crazy thing is, so, Buffs fans remember the days and probably the 90s are probably your most heralded era of college football for CU fans. That's when you had the Big Eight. That's when you had the rivalry with Nebraska. That's when you had even a rivalry with Oklahoma. Well, now Oklahoma's an SEC team. Nebraska's a Big Ten team. So the era of the Big Eight, which is now the Big 12, is really, I mean, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but it's kind of a bygone era. And I think
very much. Yeah.
I think the teams that are, the sort of the biggest, so I think CU fans in particular, and who knows in this new era of college football what new rivalries could develop with all the realignment and everything. But I think for Buffs fans who are kind of nostalgic like me, you still hate CSU. You still hate Nebraska. You still hate Missouri. Those are the teams that you're always and forever gonna sort of have a love-hate relationship with, in the sense that you love to hate them. And the other thing too, if we're talking about, how it's the second time in less than a year that these two teams have met. So actually, the day that we're recording this, which is Thursday, our flagship morning show, the Jim Davis Show. Got to get a plug in because that's my boss, and I got to,
shout out to Jim. Yeah, absolutely.
He was interviewing the radio play-by-play and color commentators for CU football. We have Mark Johnson, who's the radio voice of the Buffs, on our show every week. And then we had the special treat this week of also interviewing Gary Barnett. Now, Gary Barnett was the head coach at CU for a while. He was the offensive coordinator at CU, left that job to go coach at Northwestern, was kind of a big name there. And now he does the color commentary for CU games on the radio. So he was talking, and he and Mark both kind of echoed this point, that a lot of the players that are on this current roster for CU, and I would imagine too, and I can't speak for BYU, but I'm sure you can probably say the same, that a lot of those players that were on that team that went to the Alamo Bowl last year are no longer on the roster. They transferred out, or they went to the NFL, or a lot of guys that were brought in from the portal, or whoever, they weren't there the year before. So you'd like to think that, maybe a little extra motivation. You want to get back for kind of getting your, what handed to you in the Alamo Bowl last year. But I don't really know if that's there, because I don't think any of these players really kind of remember what that experience was last year. And if we're being honest, that season, the goal after years of kind of being in the toilet at CU was to kind of just get there, to just get to a bowl game. And if you won it, that was sort of a bonus. And if you didn't, it's, what can you do?
No, 100%. And I think you're totally right. I mean, there was so much roster turnover between both of these two schools that the idea of like a revenge game or a revenge tour, I think is certainly a little bit overplayed, and probably more so on that Colorado side because of the way that, Shedeur Sanders ended the season, now with the Cleveland Browns over in the NFL, the way that Travis Hunter finished the season with the Heisman Trophy ceremony in a lot of ways, I think was kind of a lot of Colorado fans sort of last hurrah, if you will, with that group. And I don't mean that like disrespectingly at all to any of those players. They still went to the Alamo Bowl. They played their hearts out, I think, every one of them. But there was a little bit of maybe more of a feeling of finality with kind of Travis Hunter winning the Heisman, for example, than maybe some of the other things around that bowl game in some ways. And I think you maybe saw that in some of the motivation and some of the way that BYU played in that game as well, kind of wanting to sort of prove a point, if you will. But in that regard, the most important position on the field is quarterback.
Yeah. Both
of the starting quarterbacks in that game, not here. We mentioned Shedeur Sanders. Jake Retzlaff now transferred over to Tulane after some off-field shenanigans, we'll call them. There was a lawsuit. It's now been dismissed. It turned into an honor code violation. I learned over the summer that the transfer portal doesn't actually mean anything when Jake Retzlaff just unenrolled from school and then popped up and enrolled at Tulane a couple weeks or a few months later. In a lot of ways.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I know it's wild, right? I think there are like some scholarship limitations that they can do with that, but what's a scholarship in the age of NIL?
Seriously.
Yeah, like that's kind of the ultimate question there. So there are two new quarterbacks. I think that's probably as good of a place to start.
Yeah.
With this one right here, true freshman Bear Bachmeier on the BYU side. Maybe we can get into him a little bit in a minute, but I really want to start with Caden Salter. Liberty transfer at Colorado, came into CU's game this past weekend and had a banger of a game, 37-20 win over Wyoming. And I don't know if Coach Prime has brought this up specifically. I know he kind of likes to sort of dance around and maybe play a little bit coy with his quarterback competition with the media sometimes. It feels like Caden Salter, right? he very outwardly sort of sees this quarterback move with this Buffs team, right?
So let me tell you what the sort of, because we knew that if we were going to get Shedeur Sanders for even just a year, it would have been fine. The fact that we had Shedeur and Travis for 2 years, and the first year was kind of the get to know you year, the first year that Shedeur was playing in an FBS school, and just kind of, elevating his draft stock, easy for me to say, was great. And then that year when Travis Hunter won the Heisman and Shedeur and Travis really showed their dynamic together, you're like, okay, no, this is good. This is a really good thing. What's going to be the plan going forward? Well, the plan going forward was they brought in the number 2 quarterback recruit in the nation in Juju Lewis. And they did a whole video. They had a symbolic passing of the keys from Shedeur to Juju, and Juju kind of taking the throne, right? And then you remember that Juju Lewis was only up until, I think, maybe a week or so ago, was 17 years old. The kid should still be in high school, playing high school football in the state of Georgia and setting every passing record in the state of Georgia. Okay. So they said, well, let's get a stopgap. Let's get somebody from the portal, because Prime is, if nothing else, Prime has proved that he is a master of the transfer portal. He said, let's get a stopgap guy in here, somebody that can sit under center for a year so that we can sort of build up Juju Lewis, so that we can coach him. We can, I don't want to use the term groom necessarily, because I know that has a weird connotation, but that, the idea is to kind of,
develop him and get him up to speed. And
exactly. Yeah. Let's take this 17-year-old kid and let's develop him. So they brought in Caden Salter, which was an excellent choice because he was a dual threat, dynamic quarterback. He was an excellent QB at Liberty. And so you're like, okay, this is going to provide, and not, Shedeur was mobile, but he wasn't a guy that was going to take off with his legs.
Yeah.
Caden Salter is a guy that's going to take off with his legs, and he can beat you pretty handily with his legs and his arm. All right. So season starts out not great. And you kind of have this question lingering, like, okay, how much are they going to utilize Juju? Is it going to come to a point where maybe he comes in more if things aren't great? And then you forget, too, there's a guy that's been sitting on the bench for 3 years behind Shedeur Sanders named Ryan Staub. Well, in the Delaware game, when CU was pretty handily toasting Delaware, Ryan Staub comes in, and all of a sudden, now the whole equation's thrown off because Staub played actually pretty well against Delaware. And so now you sort of have to look and go, well, we can't really waste this, this opportunity with Ryan Staub. So then he gets to start the next week, and he totally poos himself against Houston. Now, Houston, I think, is a much better team than people give credit for. And I also think that the Buffs were kind of in this weird, like, oh, we got Staub. Well, we got Salter. Well, we got Juju kind of thing. So now for Buffs fans like me, it's like, well, crap, we've got all of this quarterback controversy that was kind of self-inflicted. Like, there was self-manufactured QB controversy. And as much as I love Coach Prime, and I am kind of a Coach Prime apologist for this experiment, this was one where I kind of have to go, this was on him. This one was on him. So then it's like, all right, Caden Salter, you're back as the starter. Go out against Wyoming and do what you have done at Liberty, which is throw the ball deep and run the football with your legs. Now, there's also been some controversy around Pat Shurmur, the offensive coordinator at CU, and his calling of the plays that Caden Salter's running. How much is on the QB? How much is on the play caller? It's always kind of a question. But against Wyoming, Caden Salter showed exactly what he was brought in to do, which is to be a dynamic player with both his arm and leg. So if that stays the course, and if you sort of go back to the original playbook that you were bringing in, which is he's the stopgap before we go to Juju Lewis, let's make sure we get him as much of a chance to succeed on his own, that I think is going to bode well for CU going forward.
Yeah, and if you can get, I mean, I think that was sort of the original plan or initial plan, if you will, until it suddenly wasn't the plan. I think you brought that up really well. But if you can bring Caden Salter in for anything even remotely what he was at Liberty, I think pretty good first plan, right?
Oh, yeah.
4 years, threw for over 5,800 passing yards, 56 touchdowns with just 17 interceptions. He's a dual threat guy who ran the ball really well, ran for over 2,000 yards when he was with the Flames. Ironically, never actually played BYU. BYU played at Liberty when Kaden Salter was there. He was injured during that game. So they've never actually faced off. They've never played against each other like that until obviously they likely should this
weekend. Yeah,
I guess we have to say likely technically, but he should this weekend at Folsom Field. And just what is it about his game, Tyler, where you feel like he really has kind of become that guy that you can't really ignore to be, even if it is that 1 year stopgap, still that stopgap of, seizing a power conference program with Coach Prime and all of the flash and the sizzle that is Colorado? Like, what is it about his game, do you think, that kind of sort of helped him ascend into that role?
The thing that, and it gets back to what we've been talking about, which is the dual threat ability. Now, again, brought up the fact that there was some questions with Pat Shurmur and his play calling and whether he was actually using him correctly. I think the Wyoming game kind of settled some of that. But what makes him so interesting is you go back to the play in the Wyoming game against in the touchdown pass to, and I love the guy's name, Sincere Brown. Sincere Brown, the wide receiver. I love that name. Great football name. Just
very much all Big 12 name team. Right
100%.
Yep, absolutely.
100%.
Yep.
So that play, watching it just from a fan perspective, at first you're thinking, oh God, this is a broken play. He's going to, you can't take a sack here. Just throw it away, do whatever. Whereas Kaden Salter, and, sometimes a quarterback like this, you can get the sort of all risk, all reward, or all risk and no reward, because if he can see an opportunity elsewhere to kind of improv, right, break away from just the traditional play and improvise and make something happen out of nothing, you can get some really good results. You can also get some pretty bad ones. But he made the play, and essentially he ran out of the pocket, got away from the defender, and then lofted the football over the guy that was covering Sincere on the run. So that left him completely wide open. That was a play that I don't think was designed that way, but it was a play that was the improvisational skills that Kaden Salter brings. So it's a mix of athleticism. It's a mix of improbability that I think is also kind of paired with that athleticism that makes him, again, a really dynamic quarterback we have years of film from Liberty that tells you this. The only question is, and again, it gets back to something that Buffs fans, because, there's a lot of crossover between, if we're talking Colorado sports fans, CU Buffs fans who are also Denver Broncos fans like myself. We remember when Pat Shurmur was the offensive coordinator for the Broncos.
Oh, yeah.
And how much of a flaming dumpster fire that was. And so when they brought in Pat Shurmur to be, at first he was, I think, just an assistant or an analyst, and then they elevated him to coordinator the next year. We were all kind of sitting back like, I don't know, this guy isn't really. And then, you see the results with Shadur and Travis, and then you're going, okay, well, is that because Pat Shurmur is a great play caller, or is that the product of having Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter on your team? Who's to say? So I think the Wyoming game answered a lot of questions. I think it really showed the potential for Kaden Salter if he's given opportunities to succeed. Now he's going to go up against a tough BYU defense. And I think Wyoming also kind of gave up a little bit towards the end of the game. I was hearing the TV broadcast say, it was kind of, they ran too much time off the clock. They didn't really hustle towards the very end. They kind of just seemed like, this game's kind of over anyway. So I don't know if BYU is going to have that same deal. If it turns into a total blowout, which it won't, then who knows? But Kaden Salter, I think, again, provides that ability to improv, the ability to make plays with his legs, good arm, and just knows that he can kind of get out of trouble. Now, he can also get into trouble. And you hope that some of that can be avoided, but we'll see.
Yeah, and with the fifth year starting quarterback, you also hope that maybe some experience kind of takes over in a lot of those moments where more often than not, yes,
yeah,
when you're in kind of those improvisational moments, sometimes you have to wind up throwing to a 50-50 play, but you can maybe limit some of those 50-50 to where you're maybe more of a 60-40 or a 75-25 type of guy where you're just forcing defenses to really go and make plays. And I think that's kind of what Caden Salter sort of brings Colorado in those respects as well. Like, he's played a lot of football. He's played a lot of football, even some very high level football. For a guy who was at Liberty for 4 years, he took him to big time bowl games and wins and top 25 rankings and all that stuff. Like, he's played a lot of very high level football as well. I'm glad you also mentioned Sincere Brown in there, kind of one of these big weapons that he's got around him. And I did want to bring up with you maybe one or two kind of surprise names, if you will, on this Colorado team, because I think a lot of BYU fans in particular, they're going to be zeroed in on guys like Salter. They're going to be zeroed in on, how much of a leash does Prime give him, and do they maybe get a chance to see this 5-star freshman like Juju come in? They're gonna be pretty tuned into a lot of those big names. Is there a guy on this Colorado roster who maybe not enough people are talking about that you could see really playing an impact on Saturday, or potentially playing an impact on Saturday, who's kind of sort of a little off the beaten path, if you will?
It's so funny you say that, because the joke sort of writes itself. You said, like, is there a surprise player? Yes, they're all surprise players, because this roster has been completely turned over.
Fair enough.
So, like, a lot of the guys that, because it wasn't just Shador and Travis that made the NFL draft. There were a few guys from last year's squad that made the NFL. Jimmy Horn Jr., I think Cameron Sillman Craig put his name in the draft last year. But so, there's the thing that you're going to see, probably everyone's going to be locked in and dialed in, like you said, on Caden Salter. Jordan Seaton, the left tackle, he's like the top recruited guy that they brought in a couple years ago. He's a little dinged up in the Wyoming game, and Coach Prime said that he's probably going to come back. But if a guy like that is not on your team, or not in your game, that could be an advantage to BYU. But that also means that somebody who's behind Jordan Seaton at left tackle would have to step up. And I don't know who that is, because I don't know. I'm a Buffs fan, but I'm not so much so that I know the names of the backup left tackle at the moment. I don't know. I think that it's one of those things where, not too dissimilar to last year, the players that will succeed and have to succeed. Last year it was Shador and Travis. This year it's Caden Salter. If Caden Salter succeeds, everybody else succeeds. And if it's Sincere Brown or if it's whoever, then again, it's, the names that will succeed will be the names that you kind of already know. So I don't really know if there is a guy that will surprise us. And if it does, it's going to surprise all of us.
Sincere Brown, 200-yard receiver on the year. Omari Miller just short of that for Colorado. Those are kind of the guys. Those are the dudes I think the Caden's going to be relying on in a lot of big ways. And I think you're right. And so I think maybe we can pivot that to sort of the defense. I think a lot of this Colorado team sort of relies on the arm, or it's on the shoulders. Like, this team is on the shoulders of Caden Salter, and I don't.
Yeah.
Pun not fully intended, although I maybe kind of sort of workshopped it that way because of the quarterback aspect. But it does feel like this team is starting to fall more and more on Caden Salter's shoulder, I guess.
It is. And it's and that's kind of the way I think that Prime envisioned it, right? Is because if and not just because his son was the quarterback, but anybody who's watched even a modicum of football, college or NFL, will say it all starts the quarterback. So if your sort of quote unquote long-term plan is this highly touted recruit in Juju Lewis that we're going to sort of cook in the oven for a little bit, let him, proof and come to fruition later, But first, we're going to make sure that we have a proven commodity, and that's Caden Salter. Caden Salter is a proven commodity. And I was a little surprised that they didn't give him the start against Houston, and starting Ryan Staub, I still kind of question that decision. I don't know if they necessarily would have won that game if Caden Salter had started. And I also think, too, kind of backtracking a little bit what I said, that Houston, benching him for Houston for the Houston game probably ignited something in him. It probably lit something in him to say, all right, if I'm going to get this job back, I got to go back and earn it. And he did. And he more than earned it against Wyoming and had that incredible game where, again, you saw what he could do with both his arms and his arm and his leg. So you started asking a little bit about defense there. Ryan Livingston is the defensive coordinator for the Buffs. He came over from Cincinnati Bengals as a DB coach, and he took this Buffs defense, which was dead last in the nation under Carl Durrell, and rocketed it up like 100 spots. Now, it was still in the bottom half, but it was nonetheless a much market improvement. And they shaved off like 10 points a game in that year with Shadur and Travis. They shaved off like 10 points per game allowed from year 1 to year 2 under Prime. Some of the same problems, though, still persist, which is that they have a difficult time wrapping up and tackling. And they can, if they're not careful, they can get pretty gashed in the run game. So that's going to be something to watch. And I don't know what BYU's run game looks like this year. You can speak a little bit more eloquently to that. But if BYU can get the run game going, that's going to be something that CU will have to fix, because if they can't, then it's going to be a long, long day in Boulder.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really good point right there, because my eyes are sort of drawn with this Colorado defense to guys like an RJ Johnson, for example, and kind of that secondary and what they can do in the air and that sort of thing. BYU's probably going to want to run the ball pretty well. They've got a brand new quarterback in Bear Bogmeyer. He's a true freshman that everybody's talking about. He's had a pretty good start to the year, albeit against a sometimes questionable schedule, Portland State, Stanford. I think that win at East Carolina is actually going to wind up aging pretty well for BYU, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's been a murderous row of opponents either that have challenged Bear Bogmeyer. What BYU has shown that they can do is they can run the ball very effectively with LJ Martin. He's now an upperclassman. Buffs fans saw him in the bowl game, or at least a little bit of him, sometimes his backside a little bit. He was Alamo Bowl offensive MVP down there, and he's been really, really good to start his junior campaign like this.
Right. For
all of the talk that BYU has around this true freshman at quarterback and what the ceiling is for Bear Bogmeyer, the floor right now, I think in a lot of ways, is what LJ Martin and that run game powered by that offensive line can do in a lot of ways. So I think it sounds like based off of the Colorado defense and maybe where this BYU offense is, we could see a lot of the run game out of BYU, at least early on. I think that's probably a pretty fair assumption. And how Colorado responds to that will certainly determine, obviously, what adjustments are made and what changes wind up getting made by the quarter breaks and halftime and sort of thing.
And if the defensive starter, you mentioned the secondary, DJ McKinney for CU, that's a guy that has potential NFL draft stock, and if he's going to have a good game either in coverage or wherever, then again it gets back to you got to stop the run. If you force them to be one-dimensional, that can set up DJ McKinney, that can set up the rest of your secondary, and it can hopefully do good things. But again, CU struggled against the run this year, so it's going to be a tall order.
Yeah, DJ McKinney, I think already picking up some NFL draft type. I think top 2-3 type of player. I'm not going to say he's considered one of the arguably the best defensive back in the draft for this year, but an early first 2-day
early favorite,
at the very least, for sure. So absolutely. Tyler Fransen from Team 1340 Radio out there in Grand Junction, Colorado, serving all of the Western Slope as well. If you're going to the game, they are the CU Buffs flagship, so flip them on. Give us a little plug, give us a little promo. What does pregame look like with you guys?
So the pregame show from our good buddy Mark Johnson, the play-by-play voice for CU, they start about 2 hours before kickoff. So it'll be 6 o'clock pregame, 8:15 kickoff, and 8:15 is soft 8:15 because it's probably going to be like 8:30. And we'll probably be playing this game until Sunday morning, and that's fine because I think there's a London game for the NFL this week or a Dublin game. So
you can just lead right into it. That's fine.
So we can. But the team 1340, what's so cool about our station is so we are the carrier for the Western Slope affiliate for the Denver Broncos, the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche, the Colorado Rockies, and the CU Buffs. Plus, we carry local prep sports here. So we have the 4 Valley schools, Grand Junction Central, Fruita Monument, and Palisade. We carry sports that they play, a lot of football, basketball, baseball. We also carry other college football games. We carry the NFL from Westwood 1. And we also are the Western Slope home of the Division I Junior College World Series, JUCO, every Memorial weekend. And if you've never been to JUCO, you got to come out for that because it is
so good.
It's a brilliant time. And we're the radio home for all the JUCO games every year. So we did the math. We think with every sport that we cover and carry on the team, we can air in a calendar year anywhere from 400 to 500 games a year of sports, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And we're proud of that. We're proud of that fact. But yeah, as far as the Buffs go, again, our coverage will start about 2 hours before with Learfield and crew, Mark Johnson, Gary Barnett, Andy Lindahl on the call there, and it's going to be a good time. It's going to be interesting. If CU can pull off, because I think the line I checked was. I think CU is like a 6.5 point dog, I think. So if they can get some things figured out and get a win over a top 25 team, that bodes well going forward. I'll tell you this. I don't really know because I don't know I don't know anything. I think college football has changed so much just in the last few years that it's, they say any given Saturday, and that is probably more indicative of any given team could show up on Saturday. So it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. It's about a 6.5 point line right now in favor of BYU, and I guess that feels about right. But if I were any good, Tyler, at picking games, I wouldn't be a sports writer for a living. I'd have a condo somewhere down in Las Vegas
100%.
and make all my money that way. And so I tell people all the time, please do not take financial advice for me, especially when it comes to picks.
Same.
It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. We're all just trying to do the best that we can right here. I'm also just now realizing I probably listened to you guys online when I was tuning into the JUCO World Series in Grand Junction. I found a radio stream, and I wasn't even sure who it was for, but I was trying to tune into Salt Lake Community College when they were playing in the JUCO World Series final.
And they won
this past spring. Yeah, and they won it all, and I was listening to it on this radio stream right there from our good friends over at Team 1340 Radio in Grand Junction. So
Salt Lake was a fun team this year I got to call one of their games that they played there. They were a fun team to watch this year. So
yeah, DJ's doing a great job with that program out there. He's been there forever and really created kind of a JUCO institution out there at Salt Lake Community College. So shout out to the Bruins. I didn't think this conversation would go that way, but shout out to the Bruins, our mutual friends. And Tyler Fransen, Team 1340 Radio out in Grand Junction, Colorado, feeding all of the Western Slopes, pretty much every professional team in the greater Denver area. I think I overheard everyone shy of the you've got the Avalanche, but just shy of the Rapids and the Mammoth, the Colorado Mammoth, the team out there. So,
and not that we would never, but we're primarily focused on the Big Four.
You're pretty loaded up right now too. I don't really know where you would find space on your airways either. So, 100%. But everybody else is there. I'll tune your number in over there. A lot of Nuggets fans on this side of the Rockies too. So go find them online, Team 1340 Radio as well. That's where you can get the radio broadcast there. Tyler, thanks so much for joining me to talk Buffs, talk Cougs, and we'll see you out at Folsom this weekend.
All right, we'll see you.